there was a period that was like that where we were acknowledging that trans people exist, and so people were stating their pronouns, and it was something that there was an openness. It was a let's create safe space. I love the way you're sitting now. I'm so excited. There was this space where people were open to there's other cultures that exist. There's Black people have been oppressed in this country, and we need to make amends for that. There was this SJW kind of vibe going on, and then there was a backlash to that, and some of it got a little cringy for sure. But I am right now. I'm advocating for us reclaiming woke, because there is a sleepiness that is when all of this fascist activity is happening all around us, when the Voting Rights Act was finally fully gutted recently. I mean, just the list of things that are happening around voting rights, trans rights, women's rights, but then even beyond that, but the corruption, the blatant corruption of this administration, the gutting of the consumer protect, everything Doge did, right? That is all spelled out in Project 2025. It's not. None of this should have been surprising. What I find interesting, I was on a rant about Caitlyn Jenner. And I try not to talk about her publicly, but now in this moment I don't really give a fuck. I was on a rant with I was getting in glam earlier today about Caitlyn Jenner. I was just because she was went on the Tommy Laverne podcast, and her podcast her passport was changed. Right. Bless her heart. Her passport was changed. The gender marker was changed to male, and she, filled out a form and said it was incorrect, and they sent it in, and it came back male again. And she was just she said, "I love Trump, and I don't think it's him. I think it's the people working for him." And I'm like, girl. Girl.
You're in an abusive
girl.
relationship.
And then she literally says, and this affects a lot of other people, and this is wrong. And I was like,
how little
imagination I'm like, Caitlyn. And I got.
Do you have her number in your phone?
I used to. I don't know if it's the same number.
Right. I used to. Met her. I mean, what did she think?
Hold on. Let me cook. Let me rant, because I never do this publicly. And but at this point, when we're this high in fascism, you cannot equivocate with this shit. There's no both sizing fascism. And how does she not know this? What astonishes me is how many right-wing conservative people did not read Project 2025. They had no idea what was in it. They're surprised. They voted for this motherfucker, and they had everything. They were like, I didn't think this would happen. All of it's in Project 2025. When Doge was cutting every Social Security, every Department of Education, all of it's in Project 2025. And Caitlyn Jenner, when they said on page 4 of Project 2025, we want to exclude all these words from every document, piece of legislation that exists in this country. Transgender was one of those words. Women, or not women, transgender, gender identity.
That's the next president, by the way. No women.
Gender identity, DEI, all of it's in the document of you're 70-something years old. The conservatives have wanted to erase us. What are you smoking? How do you not fucking know that your party is all over the country? Are you just playing golf and flying a fucking plane in Malibu or something where you don't know that Republican state legislatures for the past 7 years have been taking away our rights on a state level? That is Republicans. It's not Democrats. How does she not know that? It's insane. Okay, I never do that publicly.
No.
Do you think though?
No.
But what the fuck? Sorry.
Do you think she goes, oh, it's not going to affect, is she trans for me but not for thee?
I have no idea.
Because
I have no idea. I have not spoken to her in years.
Because it's hard for me to believe that she'd be so stupid. So my question is does she go oh, I don't care if anyone else gets to be trans as long as I have a connection to the president, so I don't have to change my passport. And that's why she's I don't think it's Trump, because she just wants a favor from him. I don't think she's that naive. That's my thing.
It's similar to, there's people in life that I know have come into the country that now would be a way that you could get deported for now. But in their minds, they're like, no, that's not me. I did it the right way. But you're like, but you didn't really. Like, I know people that you're like this is 30, 40 years ago, but they
believe the propaganda. I think they believe the propaganda.
It is the thing of being like, and now it's like, let's shut the door behind me. Like, anyone else that's doing that now?
Do you think she cares about other trans people and she's just so deluded, or do you think she's so cynical that she goes, I don't give a fuck as long as I continue to be with the powers that are at the top?
I cannot speculate about what her thought process is, and I honestly have no idea. But what I do know is that when she came out in 2015, I know that according to her, literally January of 2015, a friend of mine reached out to me, and there have been rumors that Caitlyn was going to transition, like all of these magazines. And she's like, have you seen the rumors about, I won't dead name her. And I said, yes, they're actually true. This is January of 2015. She's never met a trans person before. Can you talk to her? And I said, absolutely. This is a Thursday. I was like, give her my number. Caitlyn calls me the next day. We speak for like a few hours. She had already had some feminizing procedures. She talked about her kids mostly and how she just was like a father. I think still uses father, who loves her kids, and said who was more supportive than others. And and I supported her, and a lot of us in the trans community supported her when she came out, and she had a show on E! With a lot of trans folks. And then then she came out as conservative. Well, people didn't know she was conservative, and then she started getting backlash from the trans community, and then she is advocating against trans people participating in sports.
Were you fucking pissed? You helped her.
I never ever want to be pitted against another trans person publicly, and I never want that, and I always want to be loving and supportive. And then I used to feel, and that I used to feel like you can have disagreements with people politically and still be friends with them. I was never friends with her. We spoke, and then as she started saying more, that first year out, it got dicey really quickly. She started saying some problematic things, and I just remember wanting to I remember the day she got Glamour Woman of the Year. She texted me and she was like, "Are you in New York?" And I wasn't. I was traveling at the time, and that's when I think in the article, or I don't know if her speech or something, she's like, the hardest thing about being a woman is trying to figure out what to wear. And the backlash was so, people were incensed, right? Because people who were just transphobic were incensed. It was so tone deaf. And what I say about that is I've always believed, what I learned many years ago is that I don't think, and I said this to Dylan Mulvaney, but Dylan's doing better, and she's found community. But I think early transitioning trans people should not be in front of a camera for at least 5 to 7 years.
You've said that. You've said that before. But I know.
And the reason for that is for Caitlyn to all of a sudden be held up as to be on it was a rollout of her transness and her transition. She has not lived a life as a trans person yet. She has lived a life of a person who is denying their transness, who is assumed as straight cisgender male, with all the privileges that come with that, until she was 65 years old. She does not have the experiences of a trans woman yet. And then most of us, don't have that money and privilege and all that. But she couldn't speak to a trans experience. And so there was no, and
then to just make a a joke. I mean, that probably was a little bit of a joke, but it's the equivalent of the hardest part about being a woman is figuring out to bake cookies when I get home and what to put in them. And it's that joke is really fast before getting the full.
But there was also politically. For me, I was actually the first trans woman to be a Glamour Woman of the Year. The year before Caitlyn was, it wasn't controversial, but I approached it. I'm a feminist. I'm an intersectional feminist. I write about this in my book coming out June 9th, available for pre-order right now.
Yeah.
I discovered bell hooks when I was a freshman in college, and so her work changed my life. She's intersectional. For those of you who don't know, Bell Hooks is essential. Intersectional feminist, even though she didn't use the term intersectionality, she was intersectional from jump. And so I developed a feminist politic, and I started decolonizing my mind in college and understanding how I'd internalized white supremacy and anti-blackness, even as a black person from Mobile, Alabama, and how it internalized sex. So I had already been on a journey that was a political journey that was certainly not a conservative one. Mm-hmm. It was one that was about unlearning and raising my consciousness and understanding how what Bell Hooks calls imperialist white supremacist capitalist patriarchy works. I add to that imperialist white supremacist capitalist cis-normative heteronormative patriarchy works. So in understanding that these are interlocking systems that are operating at all times. And so in this moment when we should be lifting up workers and all oppressed people, like all of these, just thinking about this moment with like trans people and the Supreme Court and voting rights, and it's all the ambidextrous nature of fascist conservatives. And they've always been a fascist party, because really, as I thought about this Supreme Court case and like been watching lots of podcasts and listening to lots of podcasts about it, and really smart people talk about it, Ellie Stahl, Joanne Reed, made the point that we didn't really have democracy in the United States until 1965. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We were an apartheid state before then. And then before the 100 years of Jim Crow, we had a slave state. We had a class of people who did not have the same rights as the other class of people. We were an apartheid state for like most of the time that we've been a nation. And John Roberts I didn't know, this thing I learned this weekend. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and I learned this weekend that in 1980, 82 or so, the Supreme Court made a decision. I don't know if it was the United States Supreme Court, it was a state, like an appellate court, made a decision, and I have to look this up, do more reading about it, but there was a Mobile case, and they basically decided, the Supreme Court decided that if the racial discrimination was not intended, then it wasn't a violation of the Voting Rights Act.
And it's really hard to prove intention.
But it's really about the impact in the outcome. And Ronald Reagan, of all people, actually extended the life of the Voting Rights Act for like 16 years as like a remedy to that Supreme Court decision. And John Roberts was incensed. He wasn't a Supreme Court justice then. He was like a lawyer who was really pushing to overturn the Voting Rights Act, because he just always felt it was unconstitutional. Rehnquist, who was his mentor, felt the same way, but Rehnquist is probably like a segregationist. So like thinking about, and so Roberts, like the patience, even just thinking about the Federalist Society was founded in like 1980, early 80s as well, as a response to the Warren Court and to Roe v. Wade and contraception, right? Like that as a response to this very sort of liberal court in Brown versus Board of Education, all these decisions that like created actual democracy in this country, made like black women equal, and at least on paper, right?
Yeah.
Thinking like John Roberts, I was just thinking a lot about like this guy since 1980, 82, but since before then, most of the Conservative Party since 1965, 61 years, they have wanted to overturn the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which is actually what democratized this country. So thinking about that, it's like, have conservatives always really been fascist in America? Because obviously we know about the realignment or whatever after LBJ, but like Democratic, Republican conservatives wanted segregation, wanted a subclass of people. There's a very specific
version of society that a very crafty group of white people want, and they've done a good job of marketing it. Like, I think
they're marketing. They're like to all these people who they don't even remember that version of life anymore because it's so long ago.
Yeah.
But they're marketing it to people who've just known shit their entire life,
and
they're saying the only way this will get better for you in your shitty lives is if we do this. And that's it's the only thing that they can imagine is being like, well, nothing's ever been good for me, and like that's it. Downside.
You're listening to The Downside
The Downside.
with Gianmarco Soresi.